Hi everyone. Hi. Hope you have a good lunch.
Yes.
So it's me again. So let's spend some time, probably about an hour, just to go through some of the global advocacy and narrative buildings for startups. I think this is more practical, to be honest, and I love to share a little bit more. And if you want to stop me anytime, let me know. I could pause and answer some of the questions. So this is what I'm going to cover today. Why advocacy powers startup ecosystem, engaging with media for global reach, winning investors with compelling stories. I think these are all very important things that we need to look at. Influencing policymaker, when we talk about today's topic, leveraging platforms for visibility, building narratives that will relate to different stakeholders. How you measure them, and last but not the very least, we look at some case studies and some actionable steps. So these are again things that are more practical. So if you are a startup, for example, or if you are a policymaker, universities, sometimes you need to talk to people, with regards to the whole journey on how you're going to make it in the startup space. These are some of the things that we should really look at. So why does it matter? So it helps to shape, the very big picture is that it helps to shape the perception, for the organization that you represent. So ecosystem with good advocacy, they grow about 25% faster. Did any of these advocacy help with your current ecosystem? I think it definitely does in a certain manner. And it's always, to me, is a growth multiplier. It boosts up a lot of different credibility, get you more visibility with the stakeholders. And of course, whenever we talk about things like this, we need to look at what kind of outcomes we are going to get. So number one, I think FDI increased by about 30% if you have this good storytelling, correct? Of course, it also enhances the job creation, give you more visibility when you do your presentation. People know what you're trying to do, right? So I think it is really beneficial, right? I think everybody would agree on this, right? Of course, whenever I tell you something good, I would love to give you something a little bit challenging, right? So there are obstacles. Definitely there are obstacles. So as a VC for myself, I always look at the upside. Of course, we're very happy talking about the upside, but if you really look at the whole ecosystem and also from within, there are a lot of downsides and challenges as well, right? So when we look at the downsides, I think there are limited budget for outreach. So if today you are the company or you are the startup, you have limited funds to put yourself in front of a new audience or put in front of new investors. You're really competing with bigger ecosystem. If you are not part of another organization or another, maybe even like an APO organization that could help you for better outreach, it's very difficult because you are competing with many different people. Of course, stakeholders can be really questioning, some of the steps that we are taking. And these are really, really big question marks, for all the stakeholders. And of course, there are also data collection gaps. You are not always having the kind of data that you need. So these are some of the challenges that you will really see. Key stakeholders, who we influence. I think number one, I like to interact with the media because media will give you a fair bit of visibility, and it helps the company as well to amplify some of their reach. You need to influence the investors, funds innovation, how they put their money to you and so forth. Policymakers, they help to shape the regulations. You really need some of them. So each one of them has a very different set of strategies that you need to engage with. 2024 data shows that 65% of the ecosystem really lack some of this focus, because there are a lot of different stakeholders that you really need to interact. You need to focus on some of them. And of course, the goal of doing all these things is to create a certain level of trust in between trust, the organization and organization, and also create a certain level of engagement. So you keep engaging your stakeholders, the outcome could be a lot better than not talking to any one of them, right? Because I invest in companies, invest in people. Some of them, they are really good tech guys, but they are not interacting. They are just sitting there and code, and once in a blue moon, they text me, hey brother, I got a really nice tech advancement, do you want to take a look? I told him you should do that on a very regular basis. Why? It's because you interact and you form a certain relationships with all these stakeholders. And that's actually one really, really big thing that is missing sometimes. You don't overdo it, but also you try not to do it like, so less that they can't even remember you. Because a lot of these investment companies, they have a big portfolio company. So they might forget about you as well. So please have a certain priority, how you're going to engage with all your stakeholders. So this is to me, it's more like a communication pyramid, including controlled discussions, how you consult them, how you inform them, and then how you collaborate with them. So these are things that you really need to do constantly, as an organization, as a company that needs to fund, or even the policymakers. So engaging with global stakeholders. I think number one, for media engagement, really basic stuff, you need to develop media kit so that you could engage with the media, tell them your main messages, your quotes, and so forth. You host a lot of webinars with journalists, with reporters, to tell them you're part of the story. So if you are in the fintech space, if you are doing something special or something that's more localized, let your local reporters know about this. It will definitely help. Of course, use nice hashtags, right? Just to get your message out, to make sure that people notice what you're trying to do. And you try to pitch trends. If you are an AI company, of course you know that AI is the trendy stuff. Pitch about it. Tell the reporters what you think. How your AI agents are working. Who is using your AI agents. These are things that you really need to talk about. Offer exclusive interviews with the founders. That's also a must to get yourself featured. I think most of these, at least I think, results in about 50% increase in awareness. Or sometimes, in some cases, a lot more, depending on which industry you are with. This is a sample media kit from SPH, it's a Singapore Press Holdings. All the costs, and so forth are all very straightforward. It's very transparent. So if you are a company, going for fundings and so forth, you want more visibility, this could be one way that you could get a bit more eyeball to what you're trying to do. Other media tactics, you can partner with regional outlets. I put an example, which is E27. I contribute daily. So if you search my name on Google right now, and then filter it by last 24 hours, you can see that I contribute to them on a daily basis. How I look at the macroeconomics, how I look at the stock market and so forth. That's what I do, just for fun, just to share knowledge. So humble suggestion is to partner with some of these outlets just to get your message across. Publish ecosystem impact reports. that gets you into a more knowledgeable expert point of view. Get it going. Arrange a startup tours. We have friends from Cambodia and so forth. Mention about bringing your partners and so forth to different startup tour. Talk about different kind of startup engines and so forth. And last but not the least, create video podcasts constantly, so that you could get some kind of searchability. Just some really quick tips, for those who are, in the startup ecosystem or in the startup organizations, where they help startup. I would encourage all these organizations who are actually, gathering all the good startup, do more media pitching, right? So keep the pitches really short, offer statistics so that you can engage with them easily, offer really exclusive angle so that it's newsworthy and so forth, and then follow up with them 24 to 48 hours. This does not apply to only projects or companies. It applies to universities, startup centers, and so forth. These are some of the things that are really, really missing, in our, at least in my context. A lot of them are not really doing that. Investor engagement basics, attracting capital. I would definitely prefer hosting and looking at some of my portfolio companies doing virtual startup showcases, because it's not really necessary for you to fly all the way to maybe US, for example, if your proposal is not polished. So do it virtually, right? You can hustle virtually, it's a lot better than you can hustle him with emails every day, Yeah, but try not to do the me, man. So you can share your ROI reports with good data, organize pitch days with founders. A lot of startup centers are doing that. We had a chat about Stanford, MIT, and so forth. They're all doing that almost on a weekly basis. Highlight on unicorn growth metrics. Sometimes it's not so much about just talking about short-term results. Or within your country, for example, you want to know how many patents, how many this and that. It's good, but sometimes it's good to showcase other countries' unicorn, so that it helps to inspire people as well, right? And we try to build more trust, with success stories. Sometimes the story is not yours, but you could share that story to relate it back to the investor, to tell them that, hey, this could be a possible angle, a possible outcome. I may not be able to raise 50 mil, but you look at me, I'm quite good looking, I could raise 10 mil, investors would buy into stories like this, as long as it's not exaggerated, right? So, plan an investment event idea. That's something that I would encourage. If you are a startup center, if you are part of a university entrepreneurship division, for example, try to plan an event idea, and get it done. You could do it online, and that's not going to cost you anything. At most, maybe a Zoom premium subscription, maybe. So please, scaling investment would also be something that I'd like to highlight. Launch ecosystem summits with nice pitches, showcase 1 billion exits. That's what something that I like my portfolio companies to do. And arrange VC founder meetups, publish unicorn pipelines and forecasts. These are things that we are already doing within our own portfolio company, and I find that the success rate is a lot higher. If you do some simple steps like this, just to make sure that the engagement level is there. Some nice tips, like the winning capital focus on ROI and exits. Most people nowadays, they only talk about, what kind of ROIs, right? But you also need to tell people what kind of exits, what kind of possibilities are there. Is it going to be an IPO to exit? Yeah, tell your story. Showcase some of the market traction, what you have done, right? If you did it in Cambodia, you managed to to come up with a good case study, showcase them, right? Always highlight that you have the unicorn potential. Maybe you are not yet, but there's a possibility. If there's no possibility, then why do you start a project, right? You need to lure the investors to you and thinking that maybe this is possible. Maybe it's possible that you become a unicorn in Mongolia, but maybe not in Singapore. Maybe. It depends on the kind of project they're talking about, right? Always use visuals and so forth. That would really help in terms of trying to get investors to come in. Investors are not very patient. Yeah, and if you give them a lot of text, it's really not going to work. So these are simple things that is really practical and is being adopted within my own organization as well. So this is some of these additional tips on how you go through the whole process. How you're going to do the pitching and so forth. Most of these are not rocket science, and most of them are not things that are stranger to people in the field. But I think most people didn't really realize the importance of the roadmap. Some of them, they just put a roadmap that is fairly vague. I think roadmap got to be a little bit more to the point and a little bit more detailed, because that is actually one of the things that investors will look at. All those things in front, in some ways, to me, it's always the same. How big the market potential is. Many of these are BS, to be honest. But if you can give a proper roadmap that is able to highlight what exactly you are trying to do, that is going to be beneficial for everybody. You do not waste investors' time, and you are very clear-cut in what you are trying to do. Policymaker engagement basics, I think sometimes we need to lure the policymakers in as well, right? So sometimes, or most times, my advice to some of my portfolio companies is that you look at the job impact, because a lot of the policymakers, we had a chat with our friend from Thailand as well, right? It's all about job creation, right? If you can solve that problem for them, create the nice perspective, they will buy in to some of your things. Post startup policies roundtable, invite them. Please do not think that you are a small company and the policymakers is not going to come. Just invite them, because they are also pretty free sometimes. Just give them a good excuse for them to get out from what they are doing and get some refresh ideas from the younger ones, right? Of course, you have to align with national goals, advocate for tax incentive. We have a lot of friends who are in the crypto space, for example, who are in India. They try to push for tax incentive, tax breaks. These are things that are good, because if you talk about tax break, your stakeholders or your community or your consumer, they will like you. So keep doing. Of course, I always emphasize this a couple of times. Share your data. Always try to share with the policymakers, because some of the data that you have is more personal to you, but it could be something new to the policymaker. Just send them. Don't be shy. They are definitely more free than the media guys. So please engage with them more. So when you want to look at the policy change and so forth, try to be part of their innovation forums. So once they see you more, they know that you're trying to push innovation. It's also easier for them to relate to you, right? Because they cannot really help you with investment per se right in the beginning. But if you have aligned goals in terms of innovation, okay, that's cool. One side story. I started advising different governments, in 2017, 2018, on cryptocurrencies. Most of them, they will think that, oh my God, it's scam. It's really hard to talk to them about this. Fast forward to today, they invite me for closed-door seminars, board meetings, and so forth, because things have transited, right? But if I didn't go with the innovation angle right in the beginning, then maybe I'll get rejection right from the start since 2018, right? So innovation is always an angle, for you to engage. Propose some public-private startup funds. That one could be a little bit difficult, but I think in most of the startup scene that we have talked about, they do have some of this 1:1 kind of fund structure. Government invest $1, VC invest $1. That's okay. Highlight on the GDP impacts. We talked about GDP impacts just now, I think, from our Indian friend. And of course, last but not the very least, look at some of these testimonials. Share with them what the founders are doing. I think we need support, again, tied with the job creation, economic data, propose win-win strategies so that everybody in the table is going to feel that they have something, and then keep all your pitching below 5 pages. So policymakers, they are actually a little bit more patient because they have just one. So they actually need more data, sadly. They actually need more data for them to present it in some of their weekly meetings, So if you can provide them not like 10, 20 pages, but 5 pages with nice graphics that they can use, and then sneakily put in one source, and then put your company there, that could get you some eyeball, right? Leveraging on our global platforms. I think we talk about many different platforms. I want to highlight that if you leverage on good platforms, I think your outcome can be a lot more palatable, right? I give an example for Token 2049 in Dubai. So it's more like a crypto event. Almost all the big companies are there. It was like a couple of weeks ago. I think you need to be visible in your field. If you are in a clean tech, you got to go for some clean tech Asia. Just make sure that you are there. You do not have a chance to pitch, it's okay. Just go there and look at people. Just go and know more people. It's all about networking. If you are not afraid to sell your story, hustle a bit harder. Maybe you can get some of these stranded VCs. Because a lot of these guys with money, I think they are very shy in terms of interaction. You can see many of them, they'll be stranded one by one at the event. They're not talking to anybody. Try to get that opportunity to speak to them. So a lot of different big events. For example, like Web Summit, 70,000 delegates in Lisbon, CES at Las Vegas. I think most of us will know. UN Climate Summit, SW in Austin, in US. Pick the event that you want to go. You might not be able to go there every single event due to budget. Pick every quarter, pick one. Oh, no budget? Maybe every year at least you pick one. And make sure that you spend enough time at the event just to get your message across. Other digital channels that we talk about, I think Bo also talk about Crunchbase and so forth. I would suggest a few others. TechCrunch, is a very nice place where you get more tech news. Bloomberg, I think we are no stranger. LinkedIn, well, it's a beautified resume portal, but you still get to meet some decent people. I think YouTube is very successful in many different ways. Medium is relatively free. You could post your thought leadership as well, right? If I want, I would also post that daily because then there's no restriction of what you are going to post, right? So get your words out. Platform strategy is basic. Step one, I think you got to prepare yourself. Share some of the success stories for impact. I think this is one of the key things that I think for preparation. Step two is about execution, right? How are you going to do your different recaps? How are you going to tell your story? I think that is something that is really important. And the pitching tips, I think emphasize on your ecosystem uniqueness. What can you offer? I think that is something that is really, really important. Crafting ecosystem narratives. Why narratives is going to win, right? You need narrative to tell a story, right? And differentiate ecosystem globally with your winning narrative. You build emotional stakeholders to buy in. Top ecosystem branded well in 2024, there's a lot of them. Most of them, they attract different talent, different media, and so forth. This is why winning narrative is really important. And the building blocks, you need to have a unique strength. Maybe you have a good talent pool, right? That could be one of your strengths. Share your journey, include growth data, define a more global vision, right? You cannot be the whole slides all about vision, right? But at least in the very beginning, they need to know what is your overall global vision. Is there something that you want to achieve globally? But okay, I can't do it now. I'm going to do it in Pakistan first, or do it in India first, right? Tying with a local culture, that's something really important. If you want people to understand what you're doing, you need to be good at where you are. Example, again, I'm going to talk about the Brazil project a little bit later on. But why I invested in the Brazil project? Because they are really the biggest in Brazil, right? If they are really the biggest, then they have a bigger chance for them to go globally, right? So if you can tie in your local culture, you really grow to a certain status. I think that's a good starting point, right? You can't be a Singapore, maybe you can't be a Mongolian company and you say that, I'm actually the best in USA. Sometimes it's very difficult to believe in this pitching strategy. I think visuals are very good with for storytelling. So create infographics, create videos, probably 2 minutes. Again, I'll show you some examples later on. Share some really nice quotes on social media. If you do this in a nice branding awareness manner, I would say that your engagement boost will go up to about 35% or more. And branding is something that is a really old word, but it's always useful. How are you going to brand yourself? How are you going to brand your company? Having consistent logos, color, clear mission statement, this is definitely must, And of course, you need to highlight some of the cultures, what you really stand for your organization, and use nice taglines so people can remember you. So branding sometimes is a really big word, but it's actually something, to me, is the most basic thing that you really need to have. It's not just about the company, it could be individual branding, right? So consistently do it, to make sure that you get the words out. Again, you need to tell story, produce some ebooks, for example, come with some event merchandise, give it to people for free. People can be wearing your logo somewhere, right? Keep doing that, Some of the pitfalls that I broke them down into a few slides, Some of the common mistakes is you do a lot of exaggeration, without evidence, So I think most of you who have read some investors pitching, they will say that, the so-and-so market is 5 trillion. So what has this got to do with your company? You need to tell them, out of this 5 trillion, how much can you get, right? So you need to put up a good show, but not too exaggerated, right? Ignoring local challenges, I think this is also a big mistake. Too generic, big mistake. Inconsistent branding, super big mistake. Because nowadays, whenever you try to tell your story, the first thing people will go and do is, what would they do? They will search you on Google, right? If your messages are inconsistent, your logo has all the different color, God bless you, man, right? It's not going to work. So please use the right kind of strategy, right? Of course, having said all this, use authentic data that you can be backed, data that you could defend. That is really important, So please remember this. More challenges. Sometimes there are no stakeholders feedback. Some stakeholders, since you are not talking to them, they are not talking to you. There's no feedback. There's no improvement. In some cases, they think that they are very good locally, But once they step out their local market, they realize that, oh, they are not as good, because maybe in the local market you have very weak competitors, and you have a little bit more money, and then you beat them. But once you step out to another market, your go-to-market strategies could be very clear, but because in the past you have been beating up the big guys, once you get to the big stage, you're missing something. So these are some things that you should really take note of. Overuse of buzzwords, it can be quite irritating, In a conversation, they keep telling you about AI, come on man. Let me know something practical about what you're trying to say. Lack of supporting statistics, these are not common, but sometimes I think they present you with the wrong statistics. This can be quite irritating as well. So 45% of the narrative fail, not because the narrative is bad, it's your storytelling is bad, right? So again, if you're in a startup center, try to talk to them more, help them as a mentor or as a manager, help those guys, because they have not seen that many startup pitches. If you could share with them your 2 cents worth, even 1 cent worth, it would help them a lot. Polish your stories, always polish your stories. That's the reason why I said do it virtually, so you could always polish your story. Get media feedback. It's not always one way. Some of these friends of mine now become friends. We invested in their company. They say, hey, we've been sending all these media pitches to the media, and none of them replied. Andy, your suggestion is bad. But then when you look at it, wow, they send the media like 20, 30 pages of of information. So it's not going to work, right? So always get media feedback. Adjust adjust based on the metrics and keep evolving this on an annual basis. You fail once, it's fine. But if you fail 12 times, well, you screwed up, really. But you got to keep doing it. Of course, we talk about the measuring. How you measure. Validate efforts to the stakeholders. Inform strategy adjustments. 60% of the ecosystem skip the metrics, right? We talk about metrics here a lot, right? Kevin talked about it. Our friend, he's not here, he talked about it. Metrics are really important. Continue to build the trust. And of course, the goal is to quantify the success. You could not, there's no way you could tell that big story all the time. Quantify it. Media tracking is straightforward. You can look at the number of articles that are being published. There are actually tools like Meltwaters that you could track your media presence. So keep doing it. Deeper insights. You could track your backlinks. You could monitor your socials. You could use the free tool from Google. These are things that we should really look into, and these are free. Capital tracking, investment metrics. Look at the FDIs if you are from policy or from a big organization. Count the number of VC deals. Track your unicorn growth. Report on job creation. These are all important metrics. Tech stack. These are some of the different apps or different platforms that we use. Cision is to look at media insights, and then we talk about Google Analytics. It's more for the traffic. And then there's a pitch book. It is actually a collective platform where you could get all the different VC data, all the different pitches that are successful, not successful, and so forth. Hootsuite is more for social media. So use all these things to look at how good that project is. Especially startup, they like to exaggerate their numbers, right? Oh, I have 12 million users. Example, there's one startup who came, I have 12 million users. But when I grill them more, they say, yeah, 12 million users. Then they send me the data Then I realized it's 12 million visits. If it's 12 million visits, then what's the point? What is the conversion rate, right? All these things are missing. So do not be fooled by all this data. There are things that you can check. If you go to similar webs, you could check your web traffic. So do that. If you go to similar webs, they have only 1 million traffic. How did that 12 million come from, right? Some additional resources like come out with different survey, Guild for benchmarking. We all mentioned about this. Different kind of scorecards, for tracking. And then if you're running events, look at the events attendance. Metrics dashboard, again, we look at all this real-time data, 5 to 7 key metrics, share with your stakeholders. So you could use the tool that I mentioned, the Tableau. This is, I think, is a paying one. Yeah. So next will be case studies. I love to share some case studies and some from different countries and so forth, just to let you have an eyeball on different things. So this, I think the narrative for them is digital frontier. Advocacy is a UN and a AU events. Kind of impact, from this digital rise. They got about 500 million in FDI. If you look at the media tracking, they have over 100 stories, really good 100 stories, and it helps about 30% of startup growth. So if you look at this, you can search it from Smart Africa. There's a lot of media that is talking about them, and this is a good case study. Take a look, learn from them. They leverage on the Smart Africa platform. They use it to promote their coding boot camps, and then they look at this not only in the Africa region, they look at it from a more global perspective. Over 50 plus global outlets, and they constantly hosted digital summit. And based on my understanding, their goal is to hit 1B in 2025. But of course, that's also with the pretext where infrastructure is in place. So it's not easy. Chile, I think there's a unicorn search. More of an innovation oasis. Advocacy will be a startup. Impact 5 unicorns. Funding about 2B VCs in 2024. 40% of the startup search. There's good government seed funding. Global Accelerator are also helping them. Many unicorn stories were shared at their local events. Media tours, bringing them to different countries. And of course, they would love to see how to hit at least 10 unicorns in 2025. One key thing that they have is to retain the talent. So they have very different stories and different things that they are doing. Taiwan, for example, tech leadership. I think the narrative is more like a tech powerhouse. TSMC focus. They have about 15B in FDI. They actually organize a lot of different innovation forums. And AI startup growth is about 20%. I think it's a really it's quite impactful, to be honest. Again, it's a more AI narrative, hoping to look at about 1B in terms of R&D for AI, building their brand in more than 50 countries through different missions. And the goal for FDI is about 20B for 2025. To me, I think the challenge for them is geopolitical. New Zealand green story, I think narrative is more like nature meets innovation. Advocacy, more from with a clean tech focus. Impact 50% growth in terms of clean tech. Media stories 20 plus. 1B in green funding. Their branding is more from a sustainability angle. COP28 speaking slots, were made available for them. And their green founders, they get different sets of profiling. during the event. And they got a lot of different kind of partnership, with EU. Goal is to be 2 B by 2025. I think the main challenge for this is R&D cost, because I don't think they allocate that much of money, for R&D purposes. So, Portugal Startup Hub is a startup gateway. They look at different impacts, for during this period of time, about 40% increase in VC. Lisbon events, there's a lot going on. Now Lisbon has become more like a crypto and tech heaven. Looking at 3B startup funding. For them, it's also the same, looking at goals about 5 billion by 2025. And they have the same, because they are in the same zone area, they have a problem with talent retention. Canada, I think the narrative is more of an AI leader. Their advocacy is an AI strategy. Impact is about 10B in terms of funding. You can look at it from a G20 reports and so forth. There are specific hubs. Toronto is one of them. There are 500 million in AI policy fund. There's a good tax credit. And there's a lot of media coverages. Their goal is about 15 billion by 2025. It's not an easy process, because you're fighting with US in terms of market share and mind share. Web3 is more of the word of use in the decentralized blockchain cryptocurrency space. Right, so the global cryptocurrency market is around 2 to 3 trillion, but as of now, it's more than 3 trillion. Because today, I think Bitcoin is more than 105,000 per piece. So right now it's more than 3 trillion. Bitcoin is ranked top 10 by market cap among all the assets, all the asset class. So high profile events definitely can go to places like Consensus, Token 2049. In fact, government acceptance of cryptocurrency has increased so much. One good example that you see that's more welcoming is the US, like what Trump is doing. Of course, it's kind of a joke, but it's still impactful. Dubai, I think they have opened up to be one of the key hubs in cryptocurrency. Humble opinion from my end, I think the challenge is more adoption. That's not easy. From a money perspective, I think it's cool. But from a technology perspective, we need to do a lot more. So this is the company that I talk about called Whoopify. It's a Brazil company that I've talked about for a while. I invested in them. Why I do that? So this is a more personal story, so I could share a little bit more. I believe in decentralized finance and not just looking at banks. How talking to banks and so forth. I believe that decentralized finance has a role to play, in our current market. Since they are building their own DeFi platform and protocol using AI-powered technology, I think it's a very good starting point because decentralized finance is something newer. AI is really trending. I think that would be very useful. And since they are also doing cross-chain trading, which means you could trade in multiple different cryptocurrency, I think that would be a really good plus point, right? So that's why I invested in them. Plus, like I mentioned, they are big in Brazil. Since they are really the biggest in Brazil, one of the biggest, I would say, it's a good starting point because many of these exchanges, exchanges are like for example, like a NASDAQ equivalent, but crypto exchanges like Binance or Bybit, for example, all these exchanges actually want more users and new users. If they are the leaders in Brazil, it's actually easier for them to sell them the story, right? And once they buy, things will be different. So the overview, like I mentioned, is a cross-chain DeFi aggregator. So it's easy to use. If you are new, you could use that. It gives you a lower cost when you trade. There's a low fee when you trade, and it's a big plus for people who are already in the space and people who are new in the space. I'm not sure whether I could share a quick video. You know, I always say, you know, in my presentation, it's good to have a quick video to show what you are really trying to sell. So I think they have created a really simple video. So it's about 2 minutes. Maybe I'll just let you take a look.
AI. It features cashback rewards, lower gas fees, better price rates, and increased security in an interface that is still simple and user-friendly. In the Multiply DEX aggregator, you can choose between 2 different swap modes, Classic mode and our exclusive Nexus mode. Each one is designed to provide convenience, security, and the best possible rates in the DeFi market. In Classic mode, users pay gas fees in the native token of the network they're trading on, like ETH on Ethereum. This is the most direct way to carry out swaps, perfect for those who prioritize speed and simplicity in their transactions. Nexus mode, our most advanced technology, allows anyone to swap tokens across multiple DEXs simultaneously, often discovering even more advantageous prices. Our algorithm can split your orders among different DEXs, minimizing price impact on large volume transactions and guaranteeing the best possible quote. Moreover, Multiply includes a gamification system, where each transaction on our DEX aggregator can earn you points and rewards. The more you use our protocol, the more benefits you unlock, such as fee discounts, special bonuses, and even chances to participate in exclusive events. It's the perfect blend of entertainment and profitability, rewarding every step you take in the DeFi universe. Discover the freedom, efficiency, and rewards that only Multiply can offer. Swap your tokens with enhanced security, optimized rates, and multiple execution modes, all while accumulating benefits along the way. With Multiply, you're always in control of your decentralized finances.
So if you look at this short video, you know, people in the industry, they will understand what is the starting point, right? For people who are not in the industry, you know, the first thing they will understand that, oh, if I'm going to use the platform, the fees are low, right? So these are some key points that, you know, key good success stories that we should try to share, right? So for them, you know, these are all mentioned in the quick 2 minutes video, and everyone can just get it. Oh, okay, they are like the there's their aggregator, you know, they are AI driven, you know, they have a reward scheme. So these are things that, you know, is more straightforward. And again, if you have a good video platform, these are easy for you to understand. You know, again, if you look at all this text and so forth, you know that their DEX, you know, their DEX is like a decentralized exchange. So this is how they help the decentralized exchange, how they are different with their competitors, you know, how they are working with regular DEXs. Why is it better for users? These are all things that are pushing, you know, in their slides. Of course, they have other things that they want to show. How this is going to work in real life, you know, what kind of rewards you are going to get. Again, just like I mentioned about how you should market yourself. So if you look at them, they have more than 3,000 key opinion leaders talking about their products, searchable on YouTube. So I just got to walk the talk and show you the examples. So if you Google them now, you can find all of them. In fact, this is more like a community-driven project. So they do not get just money from VCs. When I invested 200,000 with them, I also bought them directly from the website through my own wallet, right? And right now, this figure is not updated. This was done like 2 weeks ago. Right now, it's about 3.5 million that's being raised. So things like this, it only reflects on one thing, which is if you have a community right at the start and they are investing in you, your chances of success will be a lot higher. So this is what the Web3 space is like. And this is a real example from Whoopify, a Brazil-based fintech company. So in interactive, again, you know, look at stakeholders mapping. I think we should really try to look at these best practices, plan your engagements, share your feedback. I think all these things are really important. Narrative creating exercises, you know, these are some things that initially I want to do this as a form of interaction. But I think just sharing with you some of these thoughts, you could actually bring this back and do it with your organization as well. For example, like a narrative creation exercise. This is very straightforward. Look at your unique selling point. Pick a few good examples, put some key statistics, and then write a 30-second pitch, and then test it with your partner. Test it within your organization. If your partners believe in this, you are one step closer to success. Metrics planning as well. Look at a few key metrics. List some of the data, set some goals. Look at quarterly reviews. These are things that you should really do when you do planning for your metrics. Just to quickly wrap up, some key takeaway points. I think advocacy shapes perceptions. So what I'm trying to tell you now is, it's all about perception. If you present yourself well, the chances of you getting investment, attention is a lot higher. Stories will engage with your stakeholders. Don't come with boring stories. You need story that can be relatable. And platforms will help to boost a lot of visibility. Do not just do it on your own. Do it on Facebook, for example. It's not going to work. Reach out to your intended target audience. Branding attract resources. If you brand yourself well, you'll be attracted, and you might get good investments. Tailor messages will win trust. Build data with credibility and to your advantage. Case studies to inspire, your stakeholders. And always talk about long-term wins, not just the short-term ones. And I think advocacy is the key. I think next steps, your plan, the example that I've given, I think is also quite straightforward. Execution. And look at emerging trends again. I think AI-driven storytelling tools are in the trend right now. Please look at them. Virtual ecosystem summits, try to attend them. I think cross-border partnership will continue to grow. So please look at how we could all work together. I think more of emerging trends in terms of future predictions. I think media shifts to a lot to media content right now, and they want it to be short. Investors right now, if you talk to big institutions, they look at a lot of ESG efforts. So if you have some ESG initiatives, please try to do that. Policymakers focus on tech regulations. Try to help them. If you help them, they will help you. Platforms go hybrid. I've mentioned this a couple of times, so please do that. These are some of the tools that we could use. Startup Genome, I think talk about this. Crunchbase, he also mentioned about this. Meltwaters to track the media. PitchBook for the VCs and to hunt for the VCs. Geo for benchmarking. So what are your ecosystem stories? Anyone want to share some stories? We have some time? Do we have some time? Anyone want to share your ecosystem story? Anything that you didn't manage to present during your session? If you have, let me know. I can pass the mic to you. If not, look at some of these questions. Ask yourself. Always ask yourself all these questions so that you can grow. It's not to have doubts in yourself, or you have doubts in your strategies, but these are some of the things that you should really answer. What's your first platform to target if you are running your own company? And then if you are a VC, for example, what is your biggest challenge, right? Because right now, to be honest, I have a separate team that is dealing with India startups, right? And I talked to Calvin about that just now, when he asked the question. If you know the different challenges, you will be able to work around it. For example, in India, I think my problem with my team is that they gave me too many deals. So many deals, in the pipeline. Some are like kind of replicated. in India. Too many deals. This is a big challenge. For us to see them through, for them to sell it to us, oh my God, it's a pain. But if you go to some other countries, for example, like we talk about Fiji, for example, maybe they are less passionate, or they have not seen, the young guys have not seen the power of entrepreneurship, right? That's a big challenge. But is there a way to work around it? Certainly, but it's going to take time, because the passion, got to take time to inject it with them, right? So ask yourself, what are some of these biggest challenges, so that you could challenge yourself and work around it, and eventually have a good breakthrough. And that is what we all supposed to do, man. So quick closing remarks, advocacy as your one of your engine. Build stories that change the world. Start your strategy now, So why that was the last point is that if you have a good business idea, find someone to pitch it. Talk about it. If you really want to do it, right? If you are a university, you are a startup hub, for example, if you have a strategy, you gain something from here, just do it. Start your strategy now. There's no need for you to always work behind a PPT and then present it to your boss, and the boss like it, and that's your kind of feed your KPI. No, you should really try to see what kind of effort you could do, to engage with more stakeholders. How you could have more metrics to measure your deliverable outcomes, right? So that's something that you really need to do, and start it now. So my final words, from me and myself is shape the future of innovation with your vision, right? If you have a clear vision of what you want to do, or what your center want to achieve, try to shape it, try to mold it step by step, so that you can get your stakeholders engaged. And then, for example, if you are lacking of funds, get the VCs engaged, right? Get the government to support you. Most people think that, I'm part of the university, the government will support you. No, because there are many universities. How are you going to pitch yourself to make sure that you get a bit of more eyeball? That is actually something that's really missing. So final words, shape the future of innovation with your vision. As long as you are in that position of power to share that vision, share it. After you share it, your boss didn't really like it, it's fine. At least you share this. He knows that you have a vision. Sooner or later, when maybe your boss changes, new guy comes in, you would have new passion to do it. So just don't give up, because the startup scene, the SME scene are really one of the key pillar, for the country. The percentage of startups, SMEs versus the really big companies is huge, So we have to build that pathway, so that the country will grow. So that's my really final slides, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Andy.